Hey, welcome to this last video about cool new features and how this PowerPivot works, about DAX and its measures. So measures you've already used if you used pivot tables, you just didn't know because they were implicit, right? They weren't actually called measures, you just used the button and it did it. But what it did was called an implicit measure. So I'll give you an example. Remember when we had all the genders and the ethnicities and we wanted to count how many there were? We dragged the column and we dropped it in the values. We did an expression measure, an implicit measure to count. So that means that you can build your own measures, and that does something quite interesting and quite powerful when you think about it, because it can reduce by a lot the necessary power required by your computer to produce a task, letting you be able to do this on huge data sets, right? It's a very power efficient techniques. So if you ever have too much data to analyze and you're wondering how to do it, well, using these proper explicit measures will save a lot of computing power, right? So let's get to it and let's see how measures work just a little bit. I'm going to go down here and I'm in PowerPivot, exactly where I left off last video. And if you're wondering what we can do now, we can look at measures. And measures aren't actually here too much in these buttons. There's insert function, there's advanced, create, manage. I'm actually going to close this. And you should probably save it if you want to save it, right? Because you have to save your PowerPivot and save your Excel. You can't just save your Excel, so remember to save both. I'm going to hit close here, and I've got it still connected. I'm not too worried. And I have a measure. You see a measure. So this one's more related to Excel. The other one, you work in PowerPivot a lot more. Now I'm more in Excel, right? And I'm in Excel, and I've got my sum of unit price. And how did I do that? I went here in dim stores, and no, not in dim stores. Sorry, in fact sales. And I went in fact sales and I took unit price and I dragged it here to sum of unit price. If I go down here, you notice I've got a calculated column, right, which was my 10% increase, right? But maybe I don't want to get 10% increase to this. I'd like something a bit more interesting. So I'm going to remove this sum of unit price, and I'm going to make the same sum of unit price, but not implicitly with the tool. I'm going to use a measure to do it. So I'm going to click Measure, New Measure, and then I get this interface that pops up, and it's going to ask me what's the table name. So the table we're going to go into is fact sales, and the measure name is going to be the unit price, right? And the formula I'm going to want to do is the sum, right, of unit price. It's right there, right? But I can click sum and then go to the table, which is the appropriate one. This might take a while, right? But you find it, and then eventually, once you're there to the table you want, you find the one you want. So in this case, I wanted unit price. Where is it? Unit price. And I can hit tab to select it and close my bracket. And you see here I wrote my expression that says I want the sum of the unit price, and I want it to be, it's a general category. So I'm going to hit OK. It's a number category, and I don't want decimals. Yeah, a whole number. Wonderful. I hit OK. And it says a measure column with the unit price already exists. Choose a different name. So you can't have the same name. So I'm going to call it unit price test just to make sure it works, because really this is not the most useful thing to do. But I built a measure, and you see it put unit price test. And this is my measure now. It's not only a measure in the sense that it's something I built, it's also here now as a calculated column, but it's not a column in my data. It's an extra field that's easy to do. So if I'm not working by store name now, all of a sudden I'm not working by store name anymore. I'm curious about do I still have the continent that I built with related? Or no, I could probably just go dim geo and then get continent name. So I've got the 3 continents, and I want to know the sum of the sales. So before I had to go unit price, if you remember, and it would do unit price like this, and it would have the format that it chose. But what if I didn't want it to have that format, or I wanted to have a specific type? You see here I do it, and it's called unit price test, and it has the information exactly as I wanted it by the measure. Now, not a big difference, and nobody really will see the difference about this and that. But what's interesting about measures is there's functions that are iterative. There's some x and average x and different functions with an x after. It makes it look like the X-Men or something. But these x functions are iterative, so it goes line after line, not the total and the total. So because it goes line after line, you're able to do some interesting measures. Like, remember how we got that multiplied by 10% DAX calculated measure, calculated column? We can actually do that without the calculated column, saving us a lot of time and a lot of processing power when you're doing this to big data. So here, I'm actually going to remove this measure, and I'm going to add another measure. And the measure I want to do is, I'm actually going to leave this measure. Why not? Add an extra measure after to that. Say that the price would have been, I don't know, 10% higher on all the products. Would each country do the same? I don't know. Let's do it. So I'm going to go measure, new measure. And this time, I would have had to go and create a calculate column, but I'm going to save that because I'm going to call this my 10% price increase. I don't think percentages are going to be appreciated, so probably 10%. I could give a longer description. I probably should. It's going to be from the fact sales table, and here I'm going to use a sum x. A sum x of what? So, like I said, this is iterative, right? So you first choose the table, right? So I first choose the table of which one? Which is going to be fact. Where is it? It must be at the end. Fact sales, right? And the expression is going to be and this is where you put your mathematical equation. So what's my equation? It's going to be probably the unit price. So I'm going to type unit, see if it figures it out. Oh yeah, it did. Fact sales unit price, tab, multiplied by 1.10. So what I'm telling to it is, in the fact sales table, please take the unit price in my fact sales and multiply it by 1.1 and then sum it, not before. First, you first sum all of them, then you give me the total. Not give me the total of both and sum them together. Not what I want. So I hit OK, and it builds an extra measure. It adds it here, 10% increase, and I can see that here these are the 10% increases. And then I could see if it did, any difference, from any type of standpoint here by typing 10% increase by 110%. And if I get the exact same amounts, I can see that doing it with a multiply by 10% comes up to the same thing. But now it's a measure. So if I ever need it with something else, I don't have to worry about the formula I just created in another cell. I can remove continent name over here, right? Go in dim stores, go back to my store type, and now you see I've got the different store types and I've got different information about it. So measures are extremely useful because they give you these pre-created columns that you can redrag and reproduce and reuse. They're actually extremely useful. If you're using PowerPivot, you're probably going to have to start using measures soon, and you can't really skip it. So I hope you like this last part here about measures. I'm getting almost to the end of this. We've only got the last part about reporting tools. That won't last too long. I hope you like this PowerPivot series. I'll let you go. James WH signing out.